Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to remark that the persecution and treatment of Julian Assange are unconscionable. He's an Australian citizen who has the same rights as you or me, and the Australian government's ongoing failure to speak out against his extradition to the United States and demand his return is shameful. It's wrong, it's immoral and it's offensive for the Prime Minister to say that he should face the music, as if this is any ordinary case. It is not. It is entirely political. It corrupts our alliance with the United States when our government is too scared and too cowed to defend our own. It corrupts our democracy when our government refuses to fight to defend Australian citizens just because they don't agree with their political philosophy. And the precedent that extradition would set dangerously undermines our sovereignty and would have a chilling effect on journalism and the media's ability to hold power to account in this country and across the world. Now, we need to be very clear-eyed in this House what extradition would mean. One of our citizens, an Australian, would face an effective death sentence. The current charges would see him confined in extreme isolation for 175 years. And indeed, it's still possible in the state of Virginia, which has the death penalty, that more charges will be laid once he's extradited that would see him killed. Now, Australia has a long history of opposing extradition, a proud history, wherever there is the risk of a death penalty. And then, of course, if that's not enough, there's the torture which has been inflicted on him. It's an astounding phrase, isn't it, for an Australian in the United Kingdom, the torture that's been inflicted upon him. It should not be said lightly and must never become acceptable. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, Neil Melzer, investigated Julian's case. He said he shows all the symptoms for prolonged exposure to psychological torture, and his health conditions are so dire that his life is now at risk. Now, when the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture reports on one of our citizens, surely the Australian government should speak up, speak out and demand his return. Nothing but silence from the government. Now, it doesn't matter whether you agree with him, doesn't matter whether you disagree with him, doesn't matter whether you like him, doesn't matter whether you dislike him. He's an Australian and he's entitled to the protection of the government. But of course, if death penalty or torture aren't enough to spur this government to action, there are also broader important principles at stake. There is a lot more to this inherently political case. Let's be clear. He's been persecuted to punish him for exposing war crimes and the misuse of state power. Those who committed the war crimes have never been prosecuted. He's been persecuted to silence him forever in his WikiLeaks project and to scare others into silence. I note that we've had a power failure. They're silencing me. They've hacked the parliament. Are we on?
The mics are on.
The mics are on. All right. Is Hansard nodding? I don't personally agree with all that he or WikiLeaks has done. But that is not, cannot and must not ever be the point if we're to protect our democratic values. This case goes to the importance of journalism and journalists in a democracy, holding power to account. Publishing embarrassing, classified footage of war crimes in Iraq is journalistic behaviour. Supposedly it's protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. I'll quote Kevin Rudd. If the case is essentially that Julian Assange broke the law by obtaining and disclosing secret information, then I struggle to see what separates him from any journalist who solicits, obtains and publishes such information. Now, the claim in response we often hear is that, oh, well, he's not a journalist. That's irrelevant. The protection exists in the law for journalistic activity, not some special class of persons. It should extend to all of us, to any Australian engaging in journalistic activity. Now, what Julian Assange published is no different in principle to the Pentagon Papers in 1971 that exposed the truth about the Vietnam War and the actions of 2 United States presidents. And the chilling effect that this US case would have on the media globally is profound. The pursuit of him is very deliberate, Deputy Speaker. It's calculated to mute whistleblowing and investigative journalism. But if Julian Assange is guilty of serious crime for publishing classified material revealing war crimes, then democracies are weakened. Media across the world will be too scared to publish in the future, and that's what they want. Then there's the dangerous principle of extraterritoriality, which is nerdy and legal and boring, and it's getting lost in the propaganda. But let's be very, very clear. If this American bid succeeds, the precedent is terrifying for our democracy. Now, whatever he did in 2010 and 11, it's not espionage. There's no evidence he attempted to hack into US government IT. There's no evidence he encouraged others to. There's no evidence either that any lives were lost or serious harm done. Importantly, he's not a US citizen. His actions took place outside the USA. But be clear, under the precedent of extradition that the United States is seeking in this case, then anyone who publishes anything that the United States government brands secret could be prosecuted under the US Espionage Act. Anyone who publishes anything anywhere in the world could be extradited to the United States. Now, unbelievably, the Trump administration has stated that Julian Assange has no First Amendment rights to free speech and free press because he's a foreigner. So under this precedent, the US criminal laws apply everywhere, even when people have never been to the United States, including journalists or any Australian, wherever they are, but the US constitutional protections don't apply to them. Our government should take this seriously and defend our sovereignty and freedom. I'll just make some brief remarks on the sexual assault allegations. There's been conflicting and sensational reporting for years. Allegations of sexual assault and rape are incredibly serious matters that should not be weaponised for political purposes. The media confusion regarding this is deliberate. Julian Assange shone light and exposed corruption. Suddenly, the bright lights turned back on him, and he's a hacker, a narcissist, a spy. He doesn't shower, you know. He's not clean. And then there's the story he doesn't even feed his cat properly. Then he's a creepy predator. Citizens mustn't suspend critical thinking or their analytical capabilities when such allegations are made. I'd encourage people to read the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture's case review. These are his conclusions, not mine. He concluded that he's been subjected to a preliminary investigation for 9 years with no charges, that the police tampered and rewrote evidence to manufacture these charges, that he didn't run away from interview. He actually went to the police and authorities several times while in Sweden and was given their permission to leave the country. It was only when he was in London that he heard of the secret extradition proceedings in the United States to extradite him that he said he couldn't go back, unless Sweden provided assurances that he wouldn't be extradited to the US, and they refused to give those assurances. He offered repeatedly to give evidence from asylum, but the objective was to keep the investigation alive, to keep him in suspended animation for 9 years with no charges. Then magically, of course, the case was dropped, wasn't it, when he suddenly got into British custody and was allowed to face extradition to the United States. So despite all of this, Deputy Speaker, an effective death sentence, torture, manifest injustice, our government refuses to speak up and defend this Australian. Ministers hide behind their weasel word talking points about legal processes and having his day in court. I say again, it doesn't matter if you agree with him, it doesn't matter if you like him, it doesn't matter if you dislike him. He's an Australian with the same rights as you or me. He's entitled to the protection of his government. And as Andrew Wilkie and George Christensen said, and I never thought I'd be in a club with them in this parliament, but as they said aptly last week in London, Julian Assange is our rat bag and we should bring him home.